rain outside the studio window wasn't just falling, it was pounding against the glass with the persistence of a madman trying to break through a locked door. Inside this soundproof box, everything felt muted, as if we were at the bottom of the ocean or inside the belly of some great beast. The turntable needle gently touched the vinyl, and the room filled with thick, viscous jazz, a saxophone weeping about something morning-bound, something forever lost. The host pulled the microphone closer. His voice was velvety, calming, yet carried the shadow of a man who had seen too many nights and far too few dawns. Hotels, a strange invention, don't you think? A place we call home, but only until the bill is paid. Have you ever thought about the nature of such a space, about the sheets you sleep on? Thousands of bodies have lain there, lovers tangled in ecstasy, lonely salesmen crying into pillows, aching for home, suicides making their final decision under the monotonous hum of an air conditioner. Statistics are stubborn and cold, like bathroom tiles. 6,500 night-shift hotel employees claim they've seen things with no explanation. Shadows in corridors where fluorescent lights burned out long ago. Elevators stopping on floors that don't exist on the building's plans. How many of those who stayed in your room before you left a part of themselves behind? A flake of skin, a fallen hair, the smell of sweat, fear. Or maybe they're still here, standing inside the ventilation shafts, unseen, listening to your breathing until you turn off the light. Welcome to the Pantheon, a hotel where the "Do Not Disturb" sign doesn't work. Story number 1, the Gesell Mirror. The motel on Route 66 smelled like despair, a nauseating blend of cheap lemon air freshener, ancient dust, and nicotine had soaked into the wallpaper so deeply it felt as if the walls themselves were about to cough up tuberculosis. Mark lay on the bed in room 108, staring at the ceiling. He'd been looking for Sarah for 3 weeks. The girl had run off with a trucker, and now her trail was cooling somewhere between this dump and the Mexican border, dissolving into the heat of the asphalt. The wallpaper was yellow, patterned with sick, twisted flowers. If you stared at them too long in the half-light, they seemed to move, sliding downward like grease on a hot skillet. Mark closed his eyes, but silence never came. From the bathroom came a rhythmic dripping. Drip, 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 drip. He had tried tightening the faucet more than once, tearing off the casing around the handles, but the water ignored the laws of physics. The rhythm was maddening. 3 sharp taps against porcelain, a pause, then one long, hollow splash.
It began to resemble Morse code, tapped out by a mad prisoner. He jolted upright on the bed. The springs shrieked beneath his weight. Across from him hung a mirror. It was sunk deep into the shadow of an oak frame, completely out of place in this cheap flophouse for drifters. And it was far too clean. Not a single stain, smear, or trace of dust. In a room coated with the sticky residue of time, the mirror gleamed with sterile purity, like the eye of a predator tracking prey in murky water. Mark stood and stepped closer. Something was wrong with the mounting, too. 4 massive bolts at the corners. Their heads were stripped, gleaming with fresh metallic scratches, as if the mirror had been removed and rehung often and in a hurry. He raised his hand and rapped his knuckle against the glass. The sound was sharp and solid, lacking the hollow vibration of emptiness. Mark pressed the pad of his finger to the surface. Normally, when you touch a mirror, there's a millimeter of glass between your finger and its reflection, a tiny safety gap. Here, finger and reflection met. Flush, flesh to flesh. A Gesell mirror, two-way. Someone was watching, maybe right now. Mark felt a cold wave of rage rise from his stomach to his throat. He wasn't thinking about the gun. He wanted to see the eyes of the voyeur sitting there in the darkness, watching people undress, cry, or sleep. He pulled out a pocket knife and drove the blade under the frame with force. The wood cracked in protest. Mark leaned in with all his weight. The frame gave way with a sickening crunch, like breaking bones. The mirror, heavy as a tombstone, began to topple toward him. He jumped back, and the glass slammed into the floor with a deafening crash, exploding into 1,000 daggers. There was no wall behind the mirror. Instead, a narrow recess yawned open, a narrow passage reeking of stale, trapped air and something sweetish, old cologne. The atmosphere inside was thick, almost tangible. Mark clicked on his flashlight. The beam, trembling in the dust, snatched a chair from the darkness. A plain wooden chair with a high back, polished smooth by someone's spine. And a camera. An old, bulky video camera mounted on a heavy tripod. He stepped over the shattered frame, crunching glass underfoot. The space was narrow, no wider than a coffin. He shone the light where the lens was pointed. He saw an opening leading into his room, into his privacy. But the glass had only been transparent from one side, and now that it was shattered, the mirror stared into empty space. But the real strangeness lay elsewhere. The camera was turned away. It had never been aimed at room 108. The tripod was welded to the floor at an angle. The lens pointed toward the side wall of the chamber.
Mark aimed the beam of light at the wall and recoiled. There, crudely, furiously, and maniacally drawn in charcoal, were eyes. Hundreds of eyes, large, small, realistic with pupils and schematic circles. They all stared at one point, at the observer's chair. Whoever sat there was not spying on the guests. They made the guests look at these drawn eyes. Curiosity, stronger than self-preservation, made Mark reach for the camera. He pressed the button on the flip monitor. The screen flickered, gray static streaks appeared, and an image emerged. Black and white, grainy like sand. It was his room, room 108. The angle was impossible. These cameras were custom built, from floor level, from the densest shadow. From under the bed? On the screen was Mark. He was sleeping. The lab's time code mercilessly ticked away the seconds. It had been 10 minutes ago. He recognized the pose. He had dozed off without undressing, just before standing to rub his temples. He saw his chest rise and fall in the rhythm of heavy sleep. Then movement began at the bottom of the screen. From under the bed, the very bed he had just lain on a few minutes ago, a hand slowly emerged. It was unnaturally long, with extra joints, the bends folding at impossible angles. The fingers, pale like the belly of a dead fish, touched the hanging sheet. They crawled upward, slowly, gently, exploring the fabric. The hand rose toward his face on the screen. Mark, standing in the secret room, felt a phantom cold on his cheek. The fingers, thin, spider-like, started running through his hair, gently, like a mother stroking a child, or like a butcher preparing meat before carving. The creature under the bed did not come out, only the hand. It knew he had spat. It had tasted him. Suddenly, the drunk Mark on the recording stirred. The hand instantly, with an inhuman, blurred speed, darted back under the bed. The footage cut off. The screen went black. Silence hung in the cramped chamber, broken only by the detective's ragged breathing. He stood in the secret room, but was pinned to the frame of the broken mirror. The bed in room 108. Beneath it was dense shadow. Mark slowly backed away, feeling for the grip of his pistol. "Who's there?" His voice cracked into a shriek. No one, but he knew. Now he remembered the icy draft that had brushed his cheek in his sleep. It had not been the air conditioner. His gaze fell on the camera's display. Tomorrow's date. His mind accepted it, albeit grudgingly, struggling to find a rational explanation in Europe. A glitch? A malfunction? Suddenly, the doorknob in room 108, the very room he had been watching through the hole in the wall, began to turn slowly. The metal creaked. The door cracked open. The corridor beyond was empty.
The carpet flattened. A step, another step. An invisible heaviness entered the room and stopped opposite the shattered mirror, opposite Mark. He raised the gun, aiming at the emptiness, his hands trembling. And then, from the little speaker of the camera which he had never turned off, a whisper came. His own whisper, drawn in and hoarse. "You forgot to close your eyes, Mark." Something hit the camera forcefully, shattering the lens. The sound of tearing flesh was wet and short, and then only the sound of dripping water remained. Story number 2. Complaint from room 404. Time in old hotels is marked differently. It turns in loops, like a telephone cord, tangles into knots. Have you ever felt déjà vu walking down a long corridor? As if you've walked here before, only the wallpaper was newer, the lamp brighter, and you were someone else, or perhaps already dead. Elena hated the Grand Hotel. She had worked here 7 years, and the night shift was chipping away at her soul. The hotel, built in the early 20s, when architects loved marble, gold, and gargoyles, now resembled a huge floral tombstone with bad Wi-Fi. It was 03 a.m., the hour of the wolf, as her devout grandmother used to say, the time when the boundary between worlds thins and more people die. A ringing silence hung in the lobby, broken only by the hum of the drinks refrigerator. And then the smell appeared. Sweet, cloying, the suffocating scent of rotting lilies. It appeared every night exactly at 3, as if on schedule. Elena knew the flowers in the vases were fresh. She changed them herself. But if it smelled like this, it was as if a wreath from a 3-day-old funeral was hidden somewhere under the reception desk, its flowers already beginning to ooze slime. She took a sip of her cold coffee, trying to drown out the taste of decay in her mouth. And then a light lit up on the old switchboard. This ancient board with sockets and plugs was kept for decoration for a bygone era, but sometimes in damp weather it came to life. A rattling, mechanical ring cut through the silence, a doorbell call. Elena looked at the panel. Socket 404. The 4th floor had been closed for major renovations for half a year. No one was staying there. There wasn't even any electricity. "Grand Hotel, front desk, Elena," she said into the receiver, feeling like an idiot talking to a dead end. A voice broke through the crackle of static, a woman's, distorted as if speaking through a layer of cotton wool or from under deep water. "Tell them to stop." "Excuse me?" Elena straightened up. Sleep vanished instantly. "Who is speaking?" "The noise upstairs. They're moving furniture. They are dancing. Make them stop. My head is splitting as if squeezed in a vice." The call cut off, leaving behind the hum of emptiness. Elena looked up at the ceiling.
There was only the roof and ventilation ducts on the 4th floor. Who could be moving furniture up there? Most likely teenagers had climbed up the fire escape, more urban explorers. She sighed and picked up the heavy ring of keys and the hefty Maglite flashlight. She'd have to go. The roof was unbearably cold. The wind from the bay cut to the bone, trying to tear her cardigan off. Snow lay like an even, untouched blanket, sparkling in the cold moonlight. No footprints. No cigarette butts. No empty cans. The snow was virginally pure. If anyone had been dancing here, the surface would have been a churned-up mess. The ventilation ducts hummed evenly and monotonously. "Damn jokers," she muttered, feeling fear begin to prickle cold needles at the nape of her neck. Back at her post in the warm lobby, she smelled the lilies again. Now it was so strong it made her eyes water. The switchboard rang again. Socket 404. The light blinked hysterically. Elena grabbed the receiver, her fingers white with tension. "Listen," she began harshly, trying to shield herself from fear with her voice. "There's no one on the roof. If this is a prank—" The silence on the other end of the line was thick, guilty. And then the same voice, but now with a ghastly rasp breaking into a whimper. "Not on the roof. Right above my head. A knocking, like hooves. They're clopping. Clop, clop, clop. Please, Elena, help me." The stranger had used her name. The blood drained from Elena's face. She hadn't given it the first time. "Who are you? No one is in room 404. It's closed." "Open the door," the voice whispered pleadingly. "It's so hot in here. I can't breathe." Elena emerged onto the 4th floor. The air here was different, stale, dusty, and hot. She knew the history. 20 years ago, there was a fire in room 404. A guest had fallen asleep with a cigarette. The woman suffocated before the flames reached her body. The hotel management hushed it up, boarded up the room. The door before her was black with soot. The paint had bubbled into blisters, ugly bubbles coated in ash. The number 404 was barely legible on the charred plate. With trembling hands, Elena inserted the master key. The lock gave with a reluctant screech. The door opened, showering the floor with black dust. She aimed the flashlight beam inside. The walls were black as night. The furniture, the skeletons of a bed and a wardrobe, were charred to coal. The floor was littered with ash and debris. The smell of burning here was eternal, preserved in time. But in the center of the room, on the burnt, warped nightstand, stood a telephone. A black, Bakelite rotary dial telephone. It was perfectly clean, shiny, as if it had just been wiped down. The cord was severed and hung down, not touching the floor. And it rang.
A loud, piercing ring echoed off the bare walls, pounding in her ears. Elena should have run, but her feet seemed rooted to the floor. She approached, as if hypnotized. She picked up the telephone receiver with no cord. "Hello?" Her voice was a whisper. "Elena!" The voice in the receiver screamed, and the sheer force of it made her ears ring. "Elena, why aren't you coming? They're already here! They're breaking down the door!" Elena froze. She recognized that voice. Not just recognized it. She heard it every day, every morning, every time she opened her mouth. It was her own voice, but it sounded older, or more dead, distorted by agony. "Who is this?" she mouthed silently. "It's me!" she sobbed into her own ear. "It's you, you idiot! We're burning, Elena! Why didn't you check the wiring? The lily smell, it's not flowers, it's melting plastic!" The realization struck her like an electric shock. The smell, the calls, the heat. She looked at her hands clutching the receiver. The skin on them was beginning to blacken, blister, and curl like burning paper, revealing red meat underneath. She shifted her gaze to the room door she had entered through. The door was new, not burnt, and from under it billowing, thick, oily, black smoke was pouring in. The voice in the receiver escalated to a shriek. "The complaint isn't from room 404. It's a complaint to room 404. You're calling yourself. You're already dead. We died 20 years ago on your shift." The room around her erupted with the roar of an awakened dragon. Fire was everywhere, on the walls, on the ceiling, on her clothes. But it didn't burn. It was icy, the hellish cold of eternity. Elena lunged toward the mirror that had miraculously survived on the wall amidst the flames. Her reflection was wearing the uniform of the new front desk clerk, the old one from the 20s model. Her face was black with soot, her eyes wide with terror, and behind her back in the reflection stood someone tall, with their head entirely wrapped in dirty bandages. They were calmly holding a matchbox in their hand. They leaned toward her ear, and through the roar of the fire she heard a quiet whisper, "Complain more directly." Elena's scream was drowned by the artificial wail of a fire alarm, sounding as if from under deep water. And then there was darkness, and only the click of the switchboard put a final period in it. The host took a drag from his cigarette, and in the silence of the studio, the crackle of burning tobacco was audible. He exhaled smoke into the microphone, creating the effect of a foggy, enveloping whisper. Have you ever wondered who truly owns your body? We confidently consider ourselves the captains of this vessel of bone and meat. We command, stand up, and the legs walk. We command, grab, and the fingers clench. But what if this connection is just a lease, a thin, unreliable thread that any random draft can sever? In the Hotel Pantheon, the walls have ears, and the things have memory.
And sometimes that memory is so strong it pushes out your own occupation. Your body is simply a room someone else can check into while you're asleep. Or even worse, the hotel itself may decide you are not a guest, but merely room service. David had always been proud of his hands. For a neurosurgeon's hands, they were not just limbs, they were instruments of divine law. They were insured for a sum exceeding the budget of a small African country. They did not tremble, never, not even when he opened a skull, not even when an aneurysm pulsed beneath his scalpel in a child's brain, ready to flood the operating field with dark blood. He had come for the Medicine of the Future conference, but the Pantheon Hotel seemed stuck in the past. Room 312 greeted him with a grave-like chill. The air conditioning was off, the vent grill clogged with ancient dust, yet his breath fogged in the air. David chalked it up to poor insulation, swallowed 2 melatonin pills, and collapsed into sleep. His awakening was abrupt, like an electric shock. David sat up in bed, gulping the icy air. The room smelled of ozone and something metallic. He looked at his hands. The right one was fine, normal, warm, but the left hand lay on the white blanket like a foreign object. It was numb from elbow to fingertips. Pins and needles, thought the rational doctor. He tried to wiggle his fingers to get the blood flowing. The pinky and ring finger twitched, but not as he intended. They scraped against the sheet like spider legs. David frowned and brought the hand close to his face. Under his well-groomed, short-clipped nails was grime. No, not grime. A dried brownish substance and tiny shreds of someone else's skin. His heart skipped a beat. He hadn't touched anyone. He had slept alone. He stood up and walked to the bathroom, staggering from a strange loss of balance. His left arm hung like a dead weight, heavy, leaden. The bathroom was even colder. The mirror was fogged, though no one had run hot water. David turned on the tap and shoved his hand under the stream of scalding water. Nothing. No pain, no heat, only the sensation of water flowing over a rubber glove. Suddenly, the hand jerked, hard, spasmodically. It slammed against the faucet, turning off the water. David recoiled. "What the hell?" he whispered. He looked in the mirror. Over his shoulder, he could see the painting hanging in the bedroom. A cheap reproduction, a portrait of a sad man smoking. But now, from the corner of his eye, David swore the man's mouth on the portrait was open in a silent scream, and his eyes were rolled to the side. He spun sharply. The painting was normal. When he turned back to the mirror, his breath caught. Letters were appearing on the fogged glass. A ghost was not writing them. His own left hand was. The hand lifted of its own accord, the index finger scraping across the glass, leaving furrows in the condensation. David could feel the muscles in his forearm contracting, but he couldn't stop it. It was like a spasm possessed of intelligence. Letter by letter. O-B-E-Y. David grabbed his own left hand with his right, trying to pin it against his chest. It was icy. Not just cold, but corpse cold, like marble. And it was evolving. The strength in it was inhuman. Psychosis, he mumbled, backing into the bedroom. Transient ischemic attack. Hallucinations. The hand tore free from his grip. It darted toward the nightstand where an ice pick lay beside a champagne bucket, a complimentary gift from the hotel. Its fingers closed around the handle. David watched in horror as his own hand raised the sharp point. "No," he said. "No!" The hand swung. David managed to intercept the wrist with his right hand. A struggle began, an absurd, nightmarish battle of a man against a part of his own body. The left hand wanted to drive the ice pick into his eye. The right fought to defend him. The veins on his neck bulged. He slammed the left hand against the edge of the table. Once, twice, the ice pick clattered to the floor. The hand immediately went limp, but didn't settle. It began to crawl toward the ventilation grate on the floor, dragging David with it. He was forced to his knees. The fingers of his left hand pried up the grate with unnatural dexterity and tossed it aside. From the dark vent wafted the smells of mildew, old paper, and rat droppings. The hand dove in and pulled out a dusty, leather-bound notebook. Breathing heavily, David opened it. It was a diary. The entries were in ink, the handwriting nervous, jittery. October 14th, 1928. The deaths are called. They said they would take what I value most, my hands. I am a pianist. I can do nothing else. October 15th. They came. They held me down, right here on the carpet. I heard the crunch. I saw my own hand in the bag, but I still feel it. It is here. It wants to play. David threw the diary aside. "This is madness," he exhaled. His left hand slowly rose. It was no longer trembling. It pointed a finger at David. Then its fingers began to close around his own throat. He gagged, trying to pry the fingers from his trachea, but the grip was steely. These were pianists' fingers, strong, trained by years of practice, capable of cracking a walnut. Darkness began to cloud his vision. David fell onto his back, legs kicking. He felt the hyoid bone in his throat begin to crack. His right hand scrambled across the floor, finding the telephone cord. In desperation, he looped the cord around his left wrist and pulled, tying the berserk limb to the thick oak leg of the heavy bed. The hand jerked. Then again. David crawled away, coughing and clutching the bruises on his neck. He watched his hand tethered to the bed. It thrashed like a trapped animal, its joints bent backwards. And then something happened that caused his reason to crack like overheated glass. The hand began to twist. The crunch of bone was deafening. The ulnar and radius bones twisted, the skin stretching taut, turning white as paper. "Stop!" David screamed. "You'll tear it off!" That was exactly what it wanted. With a wet, ripping sound, the muscles tore. Hot arterial blood sprayed, drenching David's face, the wallpaper, the bed. Tendons stretched and snapped like piano strings. David screamed with a pain that was blinding, absolute. He saw his own flesh tear apart, revealing the white of bone. With a final wrench and jerk, the hand tore free from the elbow joint. David lay in a pool of his own blood, staring at the stump from which his life pulsed in a rhythmic fountain. And his left hand, freed from the ballast of his body, fell to the floor. It landed on its fingers like a spider. It righted itself. It looked at him with the blind stump of its wrist. Then, quickly, its fingers scrambling across the carpet, it scurried toward the door. It deftly jumped, hooked on to the doorknob, pressed it down, and vanished into the dark hallway, leaving behind a bloody trail of 5 streaks. David closed his eyes, listening as somewhere in the distance a ghostly piano began to play.
Story number 4. Maid Service. Anna had her own ritual. 3 knocks on the door, pause. Housekeeping, pause. Key in the lock. She loved cleanliness. Cleanliness was her god, her religion, and her curse. The outside world was chaos, dirty, sticky, unpredictable. But here, in the hotel, she could impose order. She could smooth the creases in the sheets until they vanished forever. She could exterminate any speck of dust. The manager called her on the radio as she was polishing the banister on the 2nd floor. Anna, the presidential suite. Guests checked out. It's a mess. Needs to be cleaned quickly. New guests in an hour. The manager's voice sounded strange, mechanical, like a recording on a worn-out cassette. But Anna didn't pay attention. She liked challenging tasks. She wheeled her cart to the doors of the suite. The doors were made of dark mahogany and looked like the gates to a cathedral. She knocked. Housekeeping. Silence. Anna opened the door and entered. The first thing to greet her was the smell. It wasn't the smell of tobacco or spilled alcohol. It smelled like an abattoir, a thick, sweet, coppery smell of fresh blood, mixed with the scent of bleach, which didn't mask the stench but somehow amplified it. Anna turned on the light and froze. The room was destroyed, but not by vandals. The walls, floor, ceiling, everything was smeared with blood. It was everywhere. On the beige carpet, huge crimson lakes had spread. On the bed were towels folded into the shape of swans, perfectly white, but their long necks were twisted at unnatural angles, and their heads were torn off and lying nearby. Lord Jesus, Anna whispered. She started counting to herself to calm down. 1, 2, 3. Blood. The blood must be cleaned. She put on rubber gloves, took the strongest chemicals, and stepped deeper into the suite. Her mind refused to analyze where so much blood could have come from without bodies. Her OCD demanded one thing: to make it clean. She started with the carpet. A brush with stiff bristles dug into the pile. The foam turned pink, then red. Anna scrubbed furiously, but the stain did not disappear. It changed shape. At first, it was just a puddle. Then, under her hands, the stain morphed into the silhouette of a face contorted in agony. Anna blinked. The stain was a puddle again. Just coffee. It's just cherry, she muttered. She moved to the desk. It was mahogany, but now it seemed sticky and warm. Anna wiped it with a cloth. The blood smeared, but a second later it beaded up again, tiny droplets like sweat. Anna froze. She placed her palm on the tabletop. The wood was hot, and it was pulsating, faintly, rhythmically. Thump, 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 thump. She jerked her hand back. The intercom of the room clicked loudly.
Anna, the manager's voice now sounded deeper with a wet gurgle. You're working too slowly. The guests are getting hungry. What guests? She shouted at the ceiling. There's no one here. I can't clean it. It's happening again. Don't try to clean it, the voice replied. You don't understand. The dirt isn't the blood. The dirt is you. Anna backed away until she hit the wall. Her hand touched the expensive silk wallpaper. It was damp. In a panic, she hooked the edge of the wallpaper with her nail and pulled. The sheet peeled away with a sickening sound, like a bandage being ripped from hairy skin. Underneath the wallpaper wasn't concrete or plaster. It was raw, red meat. Muscle fibers twitched at the touch of the air. Thick blue veins, wide as fire hoses, pulsed across the fleshy wall, pumping dark fluid. The hotel wasn't a building. The hotel was a living thing, and Anna was inside it. She screamed and lunged for the door, but the door was gone. The doorway had been sealed over by a film that had grown like a cataract, murky and strong. The walls began to move. The room was contracting. The chandelier tinkled like the teeth of a monster before a meal. The carpet under her feet grew soft, viscous. It turned into a tongue, a huge, rough tongue. The carpet fibers lengthened and began to coil around her ankles like tiny tentacles. From the ventilation came not air, but a yellow, acrid fluid, stomach acid. It splashed onto the maid's cart. The plastic hissed and began to melt, bubbling, dissolving into sludge. Anna scrambled onto the bed, the only island of solidity in this living hell. "Please," she screamed. "I quit! I won't tell anyone!" The manager's voice came from everywhere at once, from every pore of the pulsating walls. "Resignation is not possible. You have been transferred to the catering department." The walls closed in. Anna felt wet, hot flesh enveloping her from all sides. The pressure increased. Her ribs cracked. She smelled the unbearable smell of decay and old borscht. The last thing she saw was the towel swans raising their severed heads and looking at her with empty eye sockets. "Assembly complete," they whispered in unison. Then came darkness and a crunch. The Pantheon Hotel grumbled contentedly through its pipes, digesting another meal. The light in the hallway flickered, and the sign on the door changed from cleaning to vacant. The host stubbed out his cigarette. The ember flared and died like someone's hope. The studio grew darker, the shadows in the corners thickening, taking on the shapes of tall, gaunt figures. He leaned into the microphone so close the membrane caught the wet sound of his lips parting. "We arrive at the foundation, my friends."
On the floors where architects have gone mad, the laws of physics take a permanent vacation. They say the fall isn't the scary part, it's the landing. But in the Pantheon, there is a place where you will fall forever. And believe me, it's far worse than any impact. Story 5. The Long Way Down. Alex was in a hurry. Time was a known quantity, and money was his small god, and he had prayed to it for the last 30 years. He pressed the elevator call button on the 50th floor penthouse. His finger, adorned with a platinum ring, tapped impatiently on the polished panel. The doors slid open with a soft, warning hiss, like a snake before it strikes. The cabin was a necessary evil, too sterile. The walls were lined with floor-to-ceiling mirrors. Alex stepped inside and saw 1,000 of his reflections stepping into infinity. 1,000 Alexes, clad in expensive suits, adjusted their ties. He pressed the button for one. It lit up, not with the usual amber, but with a deep, arterial red. The elevator moved. At first, it was normal motion, a soft jolt, a brief lightness in his stomach. Alex looked at his phone, checking stock quotes. No signal. "Damn this concrete," he hissed. He glanced up at the floor indicator. The numbers changed rhythmically. 49, 48, 47. But then the rhythm changed. The numbers ran faster. 40, 30, 20. The elevator was picking up speed. Alex's stomach jumped into his throat. The hum of the cables behind the walls turned into the scream of a diving bomber. 10, 5, 1. Alex grabbed the handrail, expecting the stop, but the number 1 disappeared. In its place, a 0 lit up, then -1, -2. "What the?" he exhaled. The building had an underground parking garage, but only 2 levels. The display read -84. The falling speed became impossible. The mirrors began to vibrate. Alex's distorted reflections no longer mimicked his movements. Those in the nearest mirrors, the 10th, the 20th, began to smile, wide, baring their teeth, while the real Alex paled in horror. Suddenly, the elevator decelerated. The G-forces pressed Alex into the floor, buckling his knees. The doors opened on floor -84. A smell flooded the cabin, the smell of salt water and rotting seaweed. The corridor beyond the doors was filled with water, a green, murky, thick ocean, but the water did not pour into the cabin. It stood as a vertical wall, held back by an invisible barrier. A giant fish with a human face swam past, silently opening its mouth. In the distant corridors, suspended in the water, floated the bodies of maids in uniform. They waved slowly, inviting him in. Alex mashed the close doors button. The panel was hot. The doors slid shut, severing the view of the underwater crypt. The elevator plummeted downward with renewed force. The music in the speakers changed.
The smooth jazz began to slow down. "Fly me to the moon," warped into a low, drawn-out hum that made his teeth vibrate. The sound stretched, dissolving into digital screeches and the groans of sinners. Another deceleration. Floor -230. The doors opened. A man stepped into the elevator. He was a young guy, around 20, in jeans and a t-shirt. He looked confused. "Dad?" the guy asked. Alex pressed himself into the corner. The voice was familiar, painfully familiar. "Mikey, aren't you at college? In Boston?" "I waited for you, Dad," said Mikey, pressing a button with no number. "It was my graduation. You promised you'd come." The doors closed. The elevator resumed its fall. And then Alex saw. Mikey's skin began to wither. Wrinkles etched across his smooth forehead. His hair, thick and dark, began to thin and turn gray. "Mikey, what's happening?" Alex reached for his son, but his hand met an invisible coldness. "You were always at work, Dad." His son's voice grew deeper, rougher. "I got married, Dad. You have a granddaughter. You missed the baptism. You had a meeting with investors." Mikey hunched over. His t-shirt transformed into a worn-out, stretched-out sweater. His face became mottled with age spots. His hands began to shake with the tremor of a disease. Time flowed differently in the elevator. Each second of falling was a year of the life Alex traded for this hotel. "I'm retired now, Dad," mumbled the old man who had been his young son just a minute ago. "The doctors found what Mom had. You weren't at her funeral either." The elevator hummed like a reactor. The mirrors began to crack. A black ooze seeped from the fissures. The old man collapsed to his knees, clutching his chest. "Mikey, no!" Alex screamed, lunging toward him. But his son crumbled. The body dried up, turned to a mummy, then to gray dust. The ventilation system roared and sucked the remains away, leaving Alex alone. On the floor, only a pair of old glasses and a handful of ash remained. Alex screamed. He pounded his fists on the control panel, breaking his knuckles bloody. "Let me out! Stop this goddamn box!" The floor display got mad. The numbers were replaced by ancient runes, then simply by a solid red line. The elevator began to heat up. The mirrors melted, silver streams dripping to the floor. The reflections vanished. All that remained was a blistering box hurtling towards the center of the earth. The speaker crackled to life. Through the static and howl came a mechanical, emotionless voice. "Dear guest, you have reached the bottom." The display showed -666. The doors began to open, slowly, with the agonizing screech of metal on metal. There was no corridor behind them.
There was no fire. There was absolute nothingness, a white, sterile, blinding space without top or bottom.
And from within that whiteness, a pair of giant eyes, the size of dinner plates, stared at Alex. Their pupils were black holes. "Welcome home, Alex," a voice thundered, coming not from the speaker but directly inside his head. "We have audited your assets. Your soul has been declared insolvent." The floor of the elevator vanished. Alex did not scream. Sound did not exist in this place. He dissolved into the whiteness, becoming a part of the statistics, a line in the annual report of eternity. The host fell silent. In the studio, only the quiet hum of the equipment could be heard, like the breathing of a beast. He slowly removed his headphones and placed them on the table. Then he looked directly ahead, not at the camera, not at the sound engineer. He looked at you. Story 6. The Guest Book. The host's voice changes. The velvety softness vanishes. Now it sounds dry, harsh, right inside your head, as if you're thinking these words yourself. You think this is just an audio drama? A podcast you turn on to give yourself a thrill before bed or to kill time on a drive? You are mistaken. The Hotel Pantheon is not on any map. It is not built from brick and mortar. It is constructed from your attention. The moment you started listening, you entered the lobby. With the first character, you were handed a key. With the second, you rode the elevator. And now you are in a room. Look around. No, don't turn your head sharply. Just glance from the corner of your eye. Don't the shadows in your room seem thicker? Doesn't that familiar chair in the corner now resemble the silhouette of a seated person? Right now, in front of you, on the table or on your lap, lies not a phone or tablet. It is the guest book. Feel the weight of the binding. The leather is unnaturally warm, slightly damp, like human skin. The pages are yellowed, brittle, smelling of tobacco and formaldehyde. Open it. The first entry, the Gesell Mirror. You read that. The second entry, complaint from room 404. You heard that. Keep turning the pages. The handwriting changes. At first it's foreign, Gothic, sharp, but the closer you get to the end, the more familiar it becomes. Look at the second to last page. That scrawl, don't you recognize it? That's how you wrote in school. That's how you signed documents without reading them. It is your handwriting. And the ink is still fresh. It glistens in the light of your screen. Let's read what you wrote without even knowing it. I am sitting here, right now. It's quiet around me, but it's a deceptive quiet. I keep thinking that someone is standing behind my back. Do you feel that chill running down your spine? That's not a draft. Those are the fingers of the one reading over your shoulder. Read on, the last paragraph. It describes this very moment. The person reading this is wearing. The host pauses, and in this silence your own mind supplies the description of your clothing. They are sitting, slightly slouched. His eyes dart across the lines. His heartbeat has quickened. But in the Pantheon, checkout is only feet first. You are already checked in. Your name is in the register. Your room is ready. Do you know where it is? It is directly behind you. In the guest book, one phrase remains, the final instruction for guests. It is written in bold red ink that drips down the page like blood from a cut. Do not turn around, because the one standing behind you has waited for your glance its entire your entire life. It is standing so close right now that if you hold your breath, you will hear its joints creak as it reaches for you. Do you hear that sound? The thin, barely audible whistle of breath through a nose? That is not you. It is smiling. It has too many teeth, and it wants to taste you. Do not turn around. Keep looking at the screen. Keep looking forward. But it has already raised its hand. It has already curled a knuckle, preparing to knock. Not on your room's door, on the door of your perception, on the door of your skull. Absolute silence lasts for 3 seconds. It rings in your ears, taut as a violin string. Bam! The sound of a sharp, deafening wooden impact directly in the face of the listener. The sound of a door being broken down. Silence again, but now it is filled with white noise, like the hiss of an empty radio channel. Through it, the host's voice breaks through. Now it sounds very far away, muffled, as if from underground or from a grave. Thank you for choosing the Hotel Pantheon. We hope your stay will be eternal. Please be advised, the Do Not Disturb sign is merely a request, and we so love to break the rules. The bill for your stay will be sent to your next of kin. Payment is accepted in memories, fears, and in skin. Sleep well, and may the darkness hold you tight. It has been so lonely. I am here.